Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining, whether you're tuning in live or catching the replay later. I'm Prashra Kala, a partner with Everest Group. I work closely with global services leaders at enterprises and outsourcing services providers across the world, essentially helping navigate opportunities, challenges, and disruptions in outsourcing, shared services, and global capability centers. Now, today, we are going to zoom in on South Africa's global services industry. It's a market that's been steadily building a reputation as one of the most dynamic service delivery destinations. And today, we will talk more about its growth, the trends which we are observing, some risks, how it's competing on both cost and talent quality. So, if you are a services buyer, a provider of services, or just curious about where the next big technology and business service delivery hotspot might be, I'm sure you'll walk away with some fresh new perspectives. Uh, Today, I am thrilled to be joined by an incredible panel of practitioners from South Africa. Uh, and these are leaders who aren't just observing the trends, but they are on the front lines, shaping the trends, and supporting global clients on a daily basis. So, without further ado, I will let them introduce themselves so you can directly hear about the great work they're doing. And we'll start first with Angela.
Thank you for that. Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Kays. I represent the PESA, which is the Industry Association for Global Business Services in South Africa. And I'm responsible for investment into the country, aftercare and marketing. And it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Helen?
Hi, good afternoon, possibly good morning, depending on who's listening. Helen Maslin, so Managing Director for Huntswood Results CX. I live and work in South Africa, so don't let the accent fool you. Based in Durban, and in South Africa, we have around 3,000 colleagues across Durban and Cape Town.
Thank you. Over to you, Jason.
Super, thank you. Jason Locke's my name. I'm the Managing Director for Concentric South Africa. Also, my accent will betray the fact that I'm not from South Africa. I'm a Kiwi, which, if you follow your rugby, you'll know that it's been difficult for me for the last 2.5 years that I've been living here in South Africa, proudly leading this organisation, which is in scale around about 9,000 people across Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town. Delighted to be here.
Perfect. And I see that we've got a lot of attendees already. It'll be great if everybody who's attending this LinkedIn Live can drop in where they are dialing in from, if you want to share which companies and some interests which you might have from this LinkedIn Live. Throughout the LinkedIn Live, if there are any questions or topics which you'd like to hear more from this panel, please feel free to drop it into the chats as well, and we will take that up. And also, I am joined today by a colleague of mine, Gunjan, who's an expert and a location SME on the Africa market. So over to Gunjan for an introduction and also to walk us through with an overview.
Sure. Thanks, Prashra. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I'm Gunjan Mundra, Practice Director at Everest Group, and I work alongside Prashra in our locations and workforce research practice, helping organizations in their location strategy, workforce talent strategy. Apart from that, I also work closely with investment promotion agencies in their value proposition creation, articulation, or roadmap development. So we'll start with a broader overview of South Africa's landscape. One more thing before we start presenting the slides, we will keep this conversation more conversational. So slides are very light. We won't share a lot of content via slides, but we would like to hear more from the experts. So if we can start with the overview. Yes. So we'll start with where South Africa's talent stands today, or what is the scale of the talent. If we can move to next slide. Yeah. So currently South Africa global services market has 150,000 FTEs. Just to be clear that this does not include your talent that is delivering services domestically. This is just your global services talent. Now we see that within these 150,000 FTEs, most of the talent is delivering business process services. And within business process services, South Africa holds a strong ground delivering contact center services. Apart from contact center, South Africa also has niche capabilities in healthcare, in business insurance, and legal process services as well. Now, the IT services talent is comparatively lower, but leveraged largely for technical help desk, technical support, definitely supported by the high quality, high proficiency English language that South Africa has. If I talk about the breakdown by a sourcing model, so we have provided two views, one by providers and by enterprises. By enterprises, we largely take into account the in-house centers, your shared service centers, your GICs or GCCs. There are multiple naming conventions used across. And we see that South Africa's market is mostly provider-led. Now we see that South Africa's market has seen significant growth, especially after COVID. We saw that the market has grown 2.5x in the last 5 years. So maybe Angela, you are best positioned to answer this question. What are some of the macro drivers or policy moves that have propelled this growth? And what trajectory do you foresee over next 3 to 5 years?
Thanks for that, Gunjan. We've had some phenomenal growth over the last few years. I think that's really underpinned by a number of things. There's been a lot of support from the South African government. An example of that was during COVID, which was an awful time for everybody. The government actually designated the sector as a priority sector, an essential service. So we were able to keep everything going, remaining, servicing clients, etc. So that was an important step. And interestingly enough, it's led to additional business because of how the country performed during COVID. So government support has really been vital. I think the other thing is that it is a priority sector across, not just nationally, but across the key areas that are delivering global business services. So, for example, the Johannesburg region, the Cape Town region, Durban, and more recently, Port Elizabeth or Quebec. So there's been a lot of expansion. There's been a lot of policy alignment so that it is a priority sector. And equally underpinning that is the master plan. So a number of the sectors in South Africa have a government master plan, and it's where not just government, but also where private sector comes together. So we collaborate together, we sign the document. So that's a commitment really to say how we're going to grow the sector, what verticals we think are going to develop, what's going to be important, not just in terms of policy, but as you say, the different macro pieces of policies and strategies, etc. So it really is the combination of government and also the private sector. And I think that's really been the thing that has driven the growth in South Africa, and also, of course, the amazing talent which our operators develop when they come in, or operators who are founded locally. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela.
And I know there's been a lot of amazing policy changes and support from the government as well, to new investors, to existing operations. And we keep hearing a lot of good feedback from our global clients on that as well. In fact, I think it might be a great question to ask Jason. Jason, Angela did talk about how South Africa as a services delivery destination navigated through some of the disruption, whether that was pandemic, stagnating macroeconomic global view, and now AI-led disruption as well. Where do you see South Africa differentiate itself, and how do you see South Africa differentiate yourself? Because I'm sure you get this question from global clients on why they should choose South Africa vis-a-vis other competing geographies, when they're making a decision on where they want their services team to be based out of.
Yeah, look, I think if we reflect on the excellent points that Angela made, there's a real talent capability, and then what she's also then described is a maturity and scale, which means that an awful lot of the challenges that an offshore delivery location or service delivery location might face have been kind of understood, faced into, and in a really collaborative way between, you know, business, the operators, the industry, the PESA, and the governing bodies, as well as the government themselves, are sort of faced into those challenges to come up with sensible solutions. So if you think about all of those types of elements, it positions it really well. And if you think about South Africa as potentially being, through that maturity and through that capability set, positioned really positively to lead broader activity through the continent of Africa, certainly sub-Saharan Africa for global English. That's right there as an opportunity. And if you also think about the talent that Angela called out, and so therefore the ability of the talent in the country to scale both the complexity curve and the curve that's required to create really positive human connections from an empathy perspective, et cetera, combine that then with the value that the market offers, and it's really no wonder that the service delivery location has been growing substantially year on year with really positive outcomes.
I think that's something that we have been hearing. We also hear a lot about South Africa. Maybe Helen, you can also help us understand how has your South Africa's operations evolved in terms of scale, service mix, or client demand. Like we have been hearing a lot that the demand from US market has been growing significantly. What is your experience in that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gunjan. So like I said in my intro, I've been here for 3 years, and the growth has very definitely been incredible, but we have also seen a change in the service mix. So when I came over in 2022, we had 300 colleagues, and now we've got over 3,000. So that is significant growth, and I'm sure it's pretty similar for Jason with a bigger scale. I think what I have seen is the complexity of the services that we offer increase for a number of reasons. So one, I think AI being introduced, so taking away those simpler tasks for advisors, or using AI to support advisors, which means they can concentrate on the empathy and the complexity of the conversation or investigation they're doing. I also think lots of self-serve being introduced by clients now as well. So again, that leaves the more complex activities to our advisors. But listen, I also think the demand has grown. As Jason and Angela just articulated, South Africa as a destination for outsourcing has very definitely landed globally, loud and clear. And what we are seeing is that activities that I don't think would have been outsourced 3-4 years ago, you know, whether that's complaints, whether that's fraud, investigations, are now being outsourced. So they're not just being considered, they are absolutely being outsourced and offshored. And I think the domain expertise in those fields is really valued by clients, and they're blown away, you know, both Angela and Jason mentioned, blown away by the passion, the energy and the empathy of the talent that we have that service those customers. I also think, you know, a couple of other things that have changed is, I think the way that you treat the people that work for you, the communities and charities you support, you know, where you are working has become increasingly important to clients, and therefore when they're choosing a partner, they also look at those factors. And certainly champion challenger models I have seen increase, you know, so using 2 partners for similar work to kind of play off against each other rightly to drive high performance. So lots of changes, Gunjan.
Thank you so much for sharing these insights, Helen. I think these are very helpful for someone to see how the market has grown. And I think we have touched a bit upon the talent, quality talent available in the location, but let's take the audience through the slide as well, providing an overview of the talent landscape. So I think Angela did touch a bit on the key delivery locations. we see that most of the talent, approximately 80% of the talent, is in top 3 cities, which are Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban. And we have seen some of the organizations already leveraging some other cities, including Schwane, East London, Port Elizabeth, and even George, right? And we talked about the employed talent pool, which was 150,000 FTEs strong. But we see that South Africa also has a sizable talent pool availability at a graduate level across multiple streams. We see that 57% of this talent is from arts and finance background, which ties back to a significant share of BPS delivery that is happening from the region, right? One of the things that I also know about South Africa is it offers a sizable talent pool or a larger number of people in actuaries, as well as your CFAs, chartered accountants, that provides South Africa an edge in niche financial services delivery. And I think we also have one question from in our chat, but this was a question that I had for Helen as well. We see that South Africa strength is in English language delivery, right? It's known to everybody. The people have neutral accent. There is large number of English proficient talent. But is your organization also delivering multilingual capabilities from the region? If yes, what are those languages that are being delivered from South Africa?
Yeah, sure. So there has been, excuse me, a flood of interest in languages, and particularly from the US market. Actually, those languages tend to be Portuguese, French Canadian, German, Italian, and Spanish. And the industries are media, technology, financial services, and then some retail type opportunities as well. In terms of the availability, I think French and Spanish are more readily available. But what I would say for all of those languages is that those colleagues can command a higher salary because they are, first of all, they're in demand. Second of all, they're smaller in population. And they can also tend to command remote working rather than on-site working, again, because they're in demand. And the requests that we have had and the work is very, very high standard in terms of the language, both written and verbal. So you will know that there are certain categories of language proficiency in our world, and actually that language proficiency we are seeing needs to be of an extremely high standard for clients to be able to use it. So the answer is very definitely we have seen an increasing demand. I won't say high demand, an increasing demand. Language proficiency to be very high, so C2 to C3 for those in the know, and it tends to be the more specialist work that clients are after.
Okay. And it's interesting, right? I mean, we talk a lot about, hey, there are these high skill capabilities available for, let's say, European language support. And Gunjan then earlier talked about actuaries, CFAs. Angela talked earlier about more higher skill work, high complexity work coming to South Africa as well. So at the same time, what we keep hearing from global clients, and again, this is not just about South Africa, but about any global service delivery destination, whether that's India, Philippines, Poland, Mexico, is that they are simply not able to find the right talent in the right volume. So Jason, it might be great to get your views on this as well. I mean, we keep talking about, hey, there's opportunity, there is different kind of work happening. What's been your experience in finding quality talent with the right scale? And if you can share some of your perspectives on how you've enabled this for your organization as well, so that some of the listeners on the call, in case there are any best practices which they can pick regarding workforce models as well.
Sure. So look, I think a question I get asked quite a lot is, is South Africa already reaching some sort of talent saturation? Is there a concern that we're going to run out of the necessary folks, and then that's going to create a bit of a war for talent, which is going to drive escalating costs into the industry, right? So that's a concern for organizations that are considering coming to South Africa because they've seen it in other parts of the world over time. I think that my short answer to that is no. The slightly longer and more nuanced answer is there is a deep and broad pool of talent available in South Africa, right? And it's a pool that's really largely unplumbed. But as we look to the future, there's kind of an approach that we're going to need to take to ensure that the industry remains sustainable over time. And I think there's really kind of four things that we're looking to as an industry. One is, how do we start to take the centers and the sites that we have beyond the major centers, right? So you saw on the graphic that came up that there's been some entry into some other cities that also hold significant pools of talented labor. So there's that. And even within the larger cities that we operate in today as an industry, how do you take jobs closer to where the people reside to reduce the effort around transportation and commutes and create access? And so we're seeing that in the industry as well. And that's creating access to much larger pools of resource in a country which has a significant supply. The second thing is, how do we develop other non-traditional talent pools? So how do you get into a position where you're taking, for example, people that have never been able to access formal employment in the past, not through lack of capability, but through lack of opportunity, and create the necessary conditions for them to be really successful? And so one of the things that we invest quite heavily in Concentrix in South Africa is an impact sourcing program which aims to do exactly that. And over the last 9 years, we've had tremendous success bringing over now 5,000 young South Africans into our organization out of those pools, which could be considered non-traditional. Now, there's an awful lot of work that goes into that in partnership with a lot of organizations and government as well, to be able to ensure that we are delivering a really positive and strong outcome for our clients through the use of folks that come through these alternative sources. But the good news is, actually, the operational performance and outcomes are as strong, if not stronger, than some of the traditional models. And we've proven that over and over again through case studies. And kind of the final thing that I would touch on is this. We've got, and I saw there was a question that came up earlier around the adoption of AI in South Africa in the industry. We've got in South Africa now 9,000 individuals that use AI technology every single day in the discharge of their responsibilities and their duties for our clients' customers. So if you think about kind of the way that the future's going, the ability of people entering this industry to become incredibly proficient in the use of those future-focused technologies is incredibly high. So where am I going with that? What I'm saying is, to answer that question, yes, the adoption's been really strong in South Africa across the industry and in our organization, where we use that technology to enable better outcomes for lots and lots of customers every day. And two, there's a real opportunity from a PR perspective, if you like, amongst the different talent pools to kind of say, this is an industry and these are roles that are being created that create genuine opportunity for you to be on the leading edge of the technology wave. Yeah. And that's not necessarily a thing that would have been considered by people in South Africa entering the industry. And so the kind of the fourth point is, through that evolution and the use of technology, all of a sudden now we're attracting the best and the brightest in South Africa, which creates yet another sustainable talent pool into the industry.
Perfect. And Justin, it was great to hear about some of the non-traditional talent models as well, right? Whether that's to attract talent, retain talent. I mean, of course, it has a great benefit and impact on the broader society, but then at the same time, it makes a lot of business sense as well, because in our experience, that's come with lower attrition rates. It's often come up with somewhat lower costs as well, because many times this talent pool is spread across areas which might not be the highest cost of living areas, let's say in prime cities, right? So, I mean, it has a societal impact, it has a positive business impact, and we keep hearing positive feedback on this as well from global clients. And since talent is so important, if it's okay, we'll just spend a bit more time on talent. Maybe I'll first ask Jason to continue in case there is, and it was Jason and then Helen. Uh, what are the key areas? I mean, you talked about some areas, you talked about AI, but Jason, what are the other areas where you see some skill gaps? Now, again, this may be due to the fact that they may not be the right skills present in the market, or it may be the fact that demand's far outstripping supply, right? So any of those reasons, but Jason, what do you think are key areas where there is a talent shortage?
I have a potentially slightly controversial take on this question. I actually don't think there are particular skill gaps related to domain expertise. All right, so I don't despair that the capability set doesn't exist within South Africa to traverse that complexity curve, right? But let me explain why. I think the reality is that our industry and the way that we support customers globally is evolving so rapidly now that specific skills and domain expertise are becoming not redundant, right? But perhaps not as valuable as we might have anticipated they would be some time ago. So what then are we looking for in terms of capability and skill? Well, we're looking for the ability to be resilient in the face of change. We're looking for the capability of individuals to change at pace. We're looking for folks that are really disciplined around adopting that, and we're looking for folks with growth mindsets. And if you think about, and then of course on top of that, you've got to have some of those base capabilities. So like if you're dealing with global English, you're wanting high capability from a language perspective, which you get in abundance here in South Africa because folks grow up speaking English in the home or they're educated in the language. And so there's a native English language proficiency, which doesn't exist in lots of other similarly costed service delivery locations, right? So if you take that as a given, it's these other capability sets that you're really trying to drive. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't continue to work, with government factors and private NGOs and the likes to try and enhance education, because I think access to education is one of the most pressing challenges for all of South Africa, and we've got a real opportunity and role to play in that space. But if you think about kind of the capability set of an organization like Concentrix as a really strong learning and educating organization to apply global best practice to the development of people that have got that core skill set, then actually I don't despair, so I think that's slightly different answer to perhaps some of my industry colleagues would provide, but it's genuinely how I feel about it, the capability set or the potential of the individuals, that we have the opportunity to bring into our organization.
Helen, would love your views on this as well. Yeah, talent gaps.
Sure.
Any best practices in your experience to grow talent? Sure. And you know what? I think some listeners might also be interested in knowing if there are any different observations by various cities within South Africa. Right now, there are some of the listeners are plugged into South African industry and know the difference between locations. Some of the global listeners, though, in case you want to add anything on that, I think that'll be really beneficial.
You're asking me to give a geography lesson for sure, yeah. No problem. No problem. I don't disagree with what Jason's saying actually at all. I think, but I think where, and actually Bapesa are helping with this, as are some other organisations, where there are some gaps, we are probably trying to fill those from a skills perspective. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So one is possibly some of the more complex IT roles. And I think, Gunjan, you mentioned that actually up front. And again, we are with Bapesa and some other organisations enhancing the qualifications and skills of some of our colleagues to be able to do that and be proficient in it. I think a couple of other specialist roles where we've struggled is risk and compliance, and that tends to be around dealing with international regulation, so whether that's UK or US, more on the financial services side, to be honest, regulation. which is pretty niche. And we have attracted some individuals, but it's taken us quite a long time to find them. And then I know this is one that comes up constantly, actually, and I know Angela hears it as well, which is because South Africa has grown pretty quickly. The capability at a team leader level, I think, is questioned a lot. So, you know, lots of advisors that have been promoted to a team leader, and there's a question around, you know, capability of that particular level. And I think, and Jason touched on this, you know, turning that into an opportunity whereby you invest in those people and grow them and develop them as skilled leaders is incumbent on us, in my opinion, you know, to grow those people and give them a career. I think in terms of cities, I think Cape Town, which is classed as a tier 1 city on the west side of South Africa, it's the most mature, and I think from your first slide was also where the majority of the BPO services are placed. I think there is much greater choice, capability, ability to attract, and then I think, exactly as your map shows, the fewer colleagues you have in the BPO space, probably the more you're going to have to really search to find some of those niche skills. But I don't know if Angela wants to comment on this, but I think I definitely see BPESA and the government working to make sure that we are investing in enhancing those skills, bringing those skills on, so that we can keep up with the way that the market is going. So, Angela, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Thanks, Helen. Absolutely, I concur with what you've just said. So from a government perspective, who are partners of the BPESA, Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, there are a number of dialogues that are ongoing around what we need to do in terms of fulfilling the pipeline, because we have a very healthy pipeline from the UK, from the US, from Australia, Canada, etc. And that pipeline needs to actually have the skills in order for us to keep growing. So in terms of what government is doing, we ourselves work and partner and part funded by an organisation called Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator. So that organisation is very much about matching young people who haven't worked before or haven't had the opportunity, and some of those young people fall into the category that Jason was talking about earlier when he was talking about impact sourcing. And then they match then with corporates and companies who are looking for skills. So there's a lot of work readiness that's done at that level. But Helen's just touched on the fact around middle management and leadership, because we do have an abundance of talent that we are able to match. But once you start to get towards those more specialized skills, and we've mentioned financial services, we've mentioned the actuaries, also the legal services. Once you get towards professional and shared services, then you have to start looking in a different area to develop those skills. So there are a number of initiatives, both private and through the government, where we're looking to develop the talent that we have already, to take them to the next level, so that we can grow the industry. But we've also got a number of funders who are in different areas. We've got corporates who are getting involved in training, because the great thing about global business services is that you may train in a particular on a particular campaign or account, but the exposure you get to being in a workplace and being able to transfer those skills into other sectors and other areas is huge. So therefore, what we're starting to see, and that's really been as a result of the community, which of course is the operators and the vendors and organizations like ourselves and government, the community coming together and saying, what do we need to do to go out and talk to the school leavers, the graduates who are coming through, about why global business services offers such an opportunity in terms of employment. So we are starting to see not just South African funding organisations putting those funds towards skills development and practical skills development, not training for the sake of training, but training with an absolute position and a job in mind. And we're also starting to see international funders come into the market, because South Africa has been able to show this immense growth, up to 150,000 agents servicing internationally. And the great thing about South Africa is that we also have a very large domestic sector as well. So a number of people coming through, young people coming through, you can't always keep someone in the same job forever, but a number of people coming through are trained in other areas that South Africa has very, very good talent, and that's around financial services, leading globally, sometimes leading. And then also on the IT side, a lot of technologies that are developed here are going out globally, but we're not always shouting about them. So we've seen a huge shift in what our investors are looking for, what our operators are looking for. We've seen a huge shift. And as a result of that, we've just completed a skills survey. And in the skills survey, it's talking about what talent is needed in the next, originally we said 3 to 5 years, but it's moving so fast, it's dynamic. So we're also keeping an eye on what skills need to be developed for future technologies going forward. So there's a lot happening in the space, which is really exciting. It takes a lot of work. It takes the community to come together to deliver on it. But that's what we're starting to see at the moment, which is really very exciting.
Well, Angela, it's amazing to hear about the different kinds of long-term planning and strategies which are being adopted by the government. And I know PPESA being the national trade body, the industry association for business process services and technology services, you are in the center of a lot of these interactions and plannings with the government at one end, global investors, global programs, other global bodies who invest in South Africa, and then of course the companies which use this talent to deliver services as well, right? So not to put in your spot, but since Jason and Helen are here, how demanding have they been in terms of their requirements? Because sometimes companies don't have the patience to wait 5 years, right? So how's been the reaction from the private sector to some of the—
Be kind, Angela, be kind.
No, the response has been amazing. I've spoken about community, and that's really what we have. We do come together on a regular basis. What I always find very heartening is that competitors come together, but we have one goal in mind, and that is about the positioning and the delivering of excellent service from South Africa. We can't do it without the operators. Nothing, government, and we, as you rightly say, we play that middle rail where we're bringing people together, because a government are our partners and we look after our members. So really it's about having a seat at the table and having discussions, open discussions, candid discussions, robust discussions around what's needed and what really is required in order for us to deliver on the master plan, the creation of 500,000 jobs by 2030. We all have that goal, we all know about it, and we're all really facing in the same direction. So that's really, really key. We really depend on our members to give us that feedback so that we know that when we're having discussions with funders, with government in terms of policies, what's needed in the future. Everyone has to be really, really very honest, and everybody is. And I think that's really why we've started to see the needle move in terms of more and more companies offshoring their work to the operators in South Africa. So So that's been key. I think definite, robust conversations have been had. We're all aware of what we need to do in terms of that middle management and the leadership segment. That's been key. And what we do try to do is keep those lines of communication open. So that's why we do have those surveys. That's why we've just completed the skills survey, which is now it's now flowing into the strategy. And you'll start to see a lot more about that than in the next couple of months. But it is, I mentioned, it's a dynamic dashboard. It's changing all the time. And our role is to make sure that we move with it, and obviously with the companies.
Great. That's very heartening to hear. Okay, I'm addressing a few questions or comments which we got from our chat as well. Manish had a question on European language. I think that's answered. We did have a question from Sikar. It was around brain drain, especially technology talent to Europe. So, Sikar, well, this is something which we see in almost all locations which have a lot of talent, right? And it's something which we've come to realize that over a long period of time is net positive. Even if we compare and contrast this with, let's say, observations in India or Philippines or Mexico or Poland, there's a lot of talent which goes out to Europe, US. Generally, we do see that on a long-term basis, that talent comes back as well. So, in an overall sense, it is beneficial in which locals get more exposure to more global processes, global companies, style of working, come back and then develop something within the domestic economy as well, right? Okay, perfect. We'll now talk a bit about costs and risk. I think we've talked a lot about talent, but cost and risk being important levers as well. But before that, I do want to call out that all the attendees for today's LinkedIn Live, and again, whether you're attending it live or whether you're seeing a replay later, you will see a link posted in the chat to fill out a form, which can give you access to a location spotlight report by Everest Group, which is on Cape Town. It essentially covers talent availability, cost, risk, global investor perceptions about the location. So for folks who are interested in that report, please click the link posted in the chat as you fill out the form. Our teams will go through this and share the report with you at a later date. Perfect. Talking a bit about costs and risk, and then we'll, of course, open it up to the panel as well for more questions on that. Lacey, if you could bring up the slide for that. Perfect. So just purely in terms of cost, when we talk about compensation and infrastructure, really the delivery-related costs, South Africa actually has costs which are less than half of locations such as UK. And again, this is compensation, infrastructure, and it kind of, when we take the global lens across different regions, South Africa kind of sits at a midpoint. There are Asia-Pacific locations which are at much lower cost. And then you have got locations in Eastern Europe or Latin America, which are higher cost. So South Africa occupies that kind of a mid-space in terms of cost savings, which it provides to global clients. And it's seeing an inflation which is not very high compared to some of the other geographies, right? Just about 5% up and about, some differences by technology and business services skill. So cost has definitely been something which has worked in South Africa's favor. However, risks, when we start talking about risks, we do see that there is a perception of enhanced risks, and we'll talk more about it. I think it'll be great to hear from Jason and Helen about actual risks which they see. But in terms of risk, there are two kinds of risk which global investors often call out. One is the macroeconomic stability. The second is safety and security. So maybe I'll pose this question to Helen first. Helen, if you could share your views on some of the risk perception by global clients. Are these more perceived risks? Has there been any operational disruption? I think it'd be great to hear your views on that.
Yeah, of course, no problem. It's one of the first questions, I have to say, that we get asked by prospective clients who are not already in South Africa around risk. And I think I saw it in the chat as well, around civil unrest, etc. Absolutely, there is risk in South Africa, no doubt about it. It tends to be much lower when you are located in the hubs in the cities that we've already talked about. So the city centres of Cape Town, or where we are just north of Durban, etc. That risk becomes a lot lower. However, what I would say is having a really robust business continuity plan that makes sure that you are mitigating all of the risks, perceived or otherwise, is really important, and sounds boring, but actually isn't. So whether that is making sure that you have the ability for advisors to work from home or a different location, having incredibly strong links with local authorities, whether it's taxis, whether it's the local council, parish, district, using Angela and Bapesa and the government, making sure that those links are very strong. And Bapesa are genuinely the glue that bind the operators together with these things. But also making sure that you have backups for water, electricity, and connectivity, very importantly, both telephone lines and internet. So having all of those things in place and making sure that your clients understand you have all of those things in place is incredibly important. Since my time here, we have seen a little disruption, being really honest. So whether that is so the majority of our colleagues come to work by taxi, minibus. So whether it's some strikes that have occurred that have caused some disruption, whether it is some local protests that have happened in some of the outer regions where our colleagues live. So we have seen small amounts of disruption, all of which have actually not caused service disruption because we were prepared, we had a plan in place, and it really didn't cause any of our clients problems at all. In terms of the perception around mass civil unrest, that is certainly not what I have seen in my time here. And it feels as though the national elections were last year. It feels as though we are in a stable climate right now. And the government want this business to thrive. They want the stability in order to attract the international markets here. And it feels as though they, with Bapesa, are working with us to make sure that stability continues.
Very heartening to hear that. Jason, over to you. Views on business environment, or more importantly on costs as well, because we haven't talked much about cost, but that's an important decision factor for global enterprises as well.
Yeah, I completely endorse what Helen said there in her response. I think in any service delivery location where the value is as strong as it is in South Africa, there will be inherent risks, right? The reality is then how do we in our individual organizations collectively with the likes of Bapesa and the government create controls and mitigation strategies so that the residual risk for our clients and their customers on the other side of that mirrors what they might experience for a much higher cost in a domestic or onshore environment. So that's oftentimes that's really what we're looking to showcase when we have the opportunity to host prospective clients out here in South Africa. It's just how mature we are at being able to do that successfully. In terms of cost, look, we've been operating in South Africa now for north of a decade, right? And so there are some things that I think we've come to understand and learn, Concentrix that is, through that time. One is, if you think about South Africa relative to some of the other really strong service delivery locations around the world, this is the one that probably has the strongest alignment of underlying structures, frameworks, and the likes. So if you think about the banking system, if you think about the judicial system and the regulatory frameworks that operate here from a BFSI perspective, if you think about all of those different elements, there's a closer alignment to Europe, the UK, and the US than lots and lots of other places. The underlying stability of this country is actually pretty darn strong. There's a big challenge economically, of course, which is in the last 30 years, there's been population growth, which is at a level that means that the economy's not been able to keep pace in terms of creating jobs, but that doesn't mean that those structures aren't fundamentally sound. They are. And you see that in terms of relative stability. So then how do we think about cost? Well, the exchange rate, which is also a big factor in determining the cost of these types of services in South Africa, has shown a degree of consistency. For broader South Africa, that consistency has not necessarily been a great story because it's seen the devaluation of the rand against our major client currencies pretty consistently over the last 15 years. And in fact, if you break it down, there's no 3-year period in the last 15 years where the rand has appreciated against our major currencies that we bill in as international organizations. What does that mean? Well, that means that there's cost relief in terms of that FX rate depreciating over time, and then there's probably what we would describe as moderate volatility in some of the underlying kind of economic drivers. Yeah, so that's worked positively to keep cost contained. Yeah, for our end customers. What's operated against that is probably the cost of labor over time, wage inflation, but again at a consistent and moderate rate, and that has been somewhat offset by, again, the great work that's done by the South African government to encourage the industry to create jobs. So I would say that there's a relative, again, to some of the other international service delivery locations, moderate volatility in cost. It is something that we're all focused on, we're all aware of, and we're all looking at very, very closely to ensure that we remain competitive, because actually, I don't think of Helen as my competitor in this industry. We're collaborators and colleagues to an appropriate level to ensure that South Africa is considered and maintains its position as a really positive service delivery location. My competitors are in other parts of the world, and so in that sense, there's probably a healthy rivalry, but a constructive collaboration to an appropriate level to ensure that South Africa kind of shows out the right way.
Perfect. Okay. I do see we've just 8 minutes left. Angela, maybe the last question for you. I think we talked about costs. Global investors, again, a lot more interested also in incentives. What are the kind of support and incentives which the South Africa government or through any other avenues is provided to global investors?
Okay, thanks for that, Prashray. There are a number of different funding pots that you can approach, but the main one has been the Global Business Services Incentive. It's been introduced over, I think it's now probably the last 12 years, certainly maybe 16 years. I'm thinking about the iterations, and it's just completed a recent review. Every 5 years they review it. So we've just completed now. We've gone to our members and the industry, the sector in South Africa to present, or rather the Department of Trade and Industry presented the results of the work that they've done. So now it's in the evaluation stage. We've given our comments, and we're just waiting to hear back. But what the government did, and again, in really to support the sector, is the government, the last 5 years of the incentive finished in March 2024. So the government then just continued to roll over the last year of the incentive so that we could continue the support for our members and our investors. So that incentive is unlikely to change in terms of its structure, and really it's about attracting, the incentive is for very complex jobs, and then the jobs that really are the general part of the industry. So there are 3 different layers in terms of the incentive. Equally, the government looks at its per agent, its new job created, and its jobs created for South African residents. So that hasn't changed at all, and that incentive program has been incredibly successful, and really has been part and parcel of the success of South Africa becoming a more mature market in terms of business process outsourcing and global business services. So that has been key. In addition, the regions, the provinces, have also added a different element to the incentives. So whereas the global business services incentive is an OPEX based, some of the regions, for example, the Eastern Cape, their incentive has been based very much on infrastructure. So it's been based on properties available and what you can access to start up your business there. Then you've got the likes of the big metropolitans. So, for example, Gauteng, which is home to Johannesburg and Pretoria. They also have introduced various incentives through their new value proposition. Same with the Western Cape, and the same with Western Cape, which of course is home to Cape Town, to George, etc. And then you've got KwaZulu-Natal, home to Durban, and they've also started to introduce new incentives. So the incentives cannot compete with each other, but they are there to complement each other, so that for the operators coming in, there is some sort of advantage to setting up. And I think it was Jason mentioned at the beginning around the tier 1 cities, the tier 2 cities, etc. So what's happening in South Africa is that very much we've got wonderful concentrations where companies are operating. And then we're also looking to see how we develop the talent just outside of the main metropolitans as well. And you will start to see, and we've seen it more and more in the last 12 months, you started to see more municipalities realizing how valuable global business services investment is. And so they're also looking at incentives as well. So quite an array of incentives from the national side, where it's per agent, to per agent per year, down to very specifics where it's buildings, etc. So there's a good bouquet of incentives at the moment. Of course, we're hoping for more to entice our investors, but yeah, there's a strong showing at the moment, which is good.
Thank you, Angela. It's great to hear about the amazing level of investment which the government's also doing in this sector. And I think through the session, we've covered a lot on costs, talent, risks, business environment. Any closing remarks, Helen or Jason?
Shall I go first? Do you want to go, Jason?
No, please go.
All right, thanks. So I guess hopefully everybody's heard what an incredible geo this is for talent. Empathetic, highly educated, super energized, positive and resilient. And I feel privileged to be working in the sector and in the country. So I just hope if anybody, the one thing that somebody walks away from today with is that South Africa is a very special place full of talent to service their customers. Over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Helen. Look, only to say that I endorse everything that Helen just said there. We in Concentrix consider this a key strategic geography, and we continue to invest in South Africa and in South Africans because of all of the reasons we've talked about today. We see this as a future location which will really be able to bring the talent that blends human capability, expertise with technology, AI, to be able to create sort of phenomenal customer outcomes. And it's because of our confidence in the capability of South Africans to operate in a heavy tech-led world that we're excited about it over time. And kind of, I guess the final comment would be, thank you very much to my fellow panelists for the session and for everyone that was listening along live and for their engagement, as well as everyone that'll watch it in post. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot, Jason, Helen, Angela. It was great hearing your on-ground experiences. Thank you to all the attendees, whether you were listening in live or you're catching the replay later. But it's essentially a wrap from our side for today. Jason and Helen and Angela mentioned it. It's South Africa's global services story. It's getting more and more exciting. If any of the attendees want to dive deeper into South Africa, please check out the latest research on the Everest Group website, which is everestgrp.com, or BPESA's website, which is bpesa.org.za. For any other location-themed research as well, feel free to check out the Everest Group website. Just a reminder again, there is a complimentary copy of a location report on Cape Town. The link is available in the chat. And thank you, everybody. Once again, thank you for joining, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, everyone.